Hello, my name is Shallon Chasmar, and this is my interpersonal communication project for Hsco 508 Liberty University. Throughout the course of this presentation, you're going to be hearing me prompt you to move through the slideshow by saying the word next or next slide. So we'll go ahead and get started with my intro. I live in Virginia Beach with my husband Jimmy and our two dogs Zeus and Finnegan. I am currently in treatment for recurring endometrial cancer and consider myself blessed enough to be working full-time with preschool special ed children at a nearby elementary school, and of course take this class in pursuit of my master's degree in human services, marriage and family therapy. Next slide. An overview of the presentation. Some of the topics you're going to hear me covering are identifying my overarching goal, my definition of enlarging the conversation, a description of how my background and behavioral blend have influenced my conversation, both negatively and positively. I'll define potential barriers in my interpersonal context and how I'll deal with each one, address the issue of internal and external noise pollution and offer solutions to those, and my overall plan of action. What will I do to make my personal communication goals a reality? Next slide. My overarching goal, I currently work in a setting, as I mentioned before, where it's my job to constantly communicate with people of all ages, backgrounds, and capabilities. It's crucial to improve and address my communicational deficits, and I'm grateful to this class for bringing a lot of these things to light. My overarching goal is to operate under the scriptural reference James 1:19, "Let every man be swift to hear and slow to speak." This isn't always easy, as I have learned. I want to improve my listening skills, which is essential for my personal and professional endeavors, and remember the conversation becomes the relationship. This is a great point that was summed up in our Stewart text. Next slide. Enlarging the conversation. Honing my listening skills will contribute to enlarging my conversation. Effective listening is important because it helps maintaining and improving relationships, leading to greater professional and personal success. It also helps to keep the conversation going on strong. Conversation in the past, I kind of thought that it was what I had to offer, what I had to say. But more and more, as we learned throughout the class, listening, the concept of listening kept coming up, and that is just as important and helps maintain the fluid conversation. You can't have a continuous conversation without doing some sort of listening. So you also want to contribute to the conversation in a way that's helpful to all involved. Next slide. My background. I grew up in a house filled with high energy, noise, and heavy expectations from two loving yet strict parents. And there were 4 of us kids growing up together, so you can imagine what it was like to compete for the floor, so to speak. Being the third of 4 children, I grew up on the shy side and felt as though I was not heard because of so much going on with siblings, and my upbringing lends to how I score on my behavioral blend. Next slide. My behavioral blend. Stemming from Mel's Carbonell's book we referenced earlier on the course, I am a CIS. And some of the characteristics depicted in my blend are conservative, careful, cautious, organized, encouraging, kind, caring, loyal, compassionate, generous, shy, and soft-spoken. These are the positive indicators exuded in my background, and I commonly reflect these in day-to-day interactions, or at least I make every effort to. These characteristics also lend to being a well-rounded counselor that works effectively with people from many backgrounds. Next slide. On the other hand, some of the negative characteristics in my blend that I need to be aware of and strengthen are: I need to strengthen my leadership style, work on being less critical of other people's answers. I tend to overuse analytical skills and I think too much. This is definitely true. I am a definite thinker and have always been since I can remember. I need to do less of that sometimes. I need to not let emotions control me so much. I need to be more assertive and aggressive with positive ideas and interests. And that was something that was kind of pushed away in terms of contributing positive ideas and maybe things I had to say, because there was so much talking going on in a house with so many people. So I know I need to be more aggressive and assertive with those. Steer clear of being too negative or critical. I'm doing better with this. Do not bore people with too much information. I can be too quick to speak and slow to listen, and this is something I have given extra attention to, especially since I have designated this as my overarching goal. Next slide. Barriers. Potential barriers in my interpersonal context that I need to focus on and address are biased listening, the faker. I tend to do that sometimes where it sounds awful, but pretend to be listening when my mind is elsewhere. And in fact, aside from the class contribution to bringing this to light and talking with my mother on the phone, I've noticed that she does this. She is guilty of having the TV on constantly. And so the other night we were talking, had the TV on, and she didn't hear what I had to say because she was too busy listening to what was on the TV. It's kind of funny now, but not so funny when you're in the midst of a conversation, a very important one, and people are doing that. I'm also at times the interrupter. It stems from upbringing, growing up in a household where we were competing for the chance to speak. You don't want to do that. That's kind of a rude thing to do. Although there are times where it's necessary to jump in and get a point in that's really significant or really helpful to somebody. The intellectual or logical listener. These types of listeners are so involved in programming what is being said that they miss out on the deeper meaning of what is spoken. This is something I think I do most often, where when someone is talking and we're discussing something, I'll hang on an important point that they have made, and I will begin at that point formulating my response to that, even though the conversation's moving forward. And you want to be careful with doing that because then you miss a lot of what is said after. Next slide. Overcoming these barriers. What am I going to do to overcome these barriers? Well, I'm going to make more concerted efforts to go into a conversation without any preconceived opinions. You want to be careful not to let those get in the way. Avoid fake listening by making sure I am clear enough in the state of mind to have a conversation and avoid letting my mind wander elsewhere. Abstain from interrupting and wait for an acceptable point to interject my thoughts. I will make a concerted effort to listen in totality rather than getting stuck on a particular point and formulating my response before the person is finished talking. It's really important to hear all that they have to say, and you'd certainly want, other people to hear what you have to say in totality as well. So it's only fair. Next slide. Internal and external noise pollution. Some of the internal things that go on with noise pollution are things that distract you personally, keep me from really hearing the person speaking, picking apart the conversation, only hearing certain parts. So your mind wanders to all the things that you have to do. Maybe something somebody else said is really bothering you. Those are internal barriers. Some solutions to those are listen entirely. Really try and make yourself focus on that person that you're speaking to and wait for your turn. Next slide. External noise pollution. These are the more, these are things that are easy to pinpoint. They're things happening around you. They're distracting you from hearing that person, like the TV that my mother was listening to when we were on the phone the other night. It could be other people talking, loud noises, airplanes, dogs barking, technology being used. Solutions to those are to remove distractions as much as you can before communicating to ensure that it's a fluid exchange, and as much as you can. If you don't want to go out and have a serious conversation in a place that's very loud and that person will be easily distracted in. Next slide. Plan of action. My plan of action is to listen, really listen and hone those listening skills. To listen effectively, one must empathize with the speaker, control one's own responses, and devote time and energy to listening. It is important to remember that good listeners reserve judgment until they are thoroughly understanding the message. Repeat accurately. This is a good tactic to use. You repeat back what you heard the speaker say, and it helps them feel safe and heard. And last, you want to acknowledge and use words, tone, body language to indicate that it's okay for that talker to think and feel the way that they do. It's important. Next slide. These are some of the references I use. And in closing, I just want to say that I have really learned a lot from this class. I considered myself to be a really good speaker, a good listener, but there are definitely quite a few things I can work on to enhance that and improve my skills that I can use in becoming a really effective counselor. It's a definite goal of mine. And I love the people in my life, and I want to make sure that I am an effective communicator and listener where I can help them in the best light possible. Thank you, Dr. V.